There exists a moment in every human life that Carl Jung described as both terrifying and beautiful. The moment when you finally meet your true self. Not the self you've constructed for the world, not the persona you wear like a mask, but the raw, unfiltered essence of who you really are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectations, and illusions. Jung warned us that this encounter would shake us to our very core, because in that moment of recognition, everything you thought you knew about yourself crumbles away like ancient walls, finally surrendering to time. Most people spend their entire lives running from this meeting. They fill their days with endless distractions, surround themselves with noise, and build elaborate identities that feel safe and familiar. But Jung understood something profound about the human psyche, that avoiding your true self doesn't make it disappear. It simply means you'll live your entire life as a stranger to yourself, wondering why nothing feels quite right, why success feels empty, and why even your closest relationships leave you feeling fundamentally alone. The great psychologist observed that those brave enough to undertake this inner journey would discover something remarkable. Beyond the terror of dissolution lies a beauty so profound that it transforms everything. This isn't just psychological theory. This is the very foundation of what Jung called individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole, integrated, and authentically themselves. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal the 7 unmistakable signs that you're approaching this sacred threshold, the moment when your true self begins to emerge from the depths of your unconscious. Some of these signs will disturb you. Others will fill you with an inexplicable sense of coming home, but all of them point to the same profound truth. You are being called to become who you were always meant to be. The first sign that you're approaching an encounter with your authentic self is what Jung called the great disillusionment. This isn't ordinary disappointment or temporary sadness. This is the bone-deep recognition that the life you've been living feels fundamentally false, like you've been playing a character in someone else's story for so long that you've forgotten your own lines. Sarah, a successful corporate lawyer, described this feeling perfectly. At 38, she had everything society told her she should want: a corner office, a 6-figure salary, the admiration of her peers. Yet she found herself sitting in her car after work, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror and feeling like she was looking at a complete stranger. "I felt like I was wearing a costume that had somehow fused to my skin," she told me. "I couldn't remember when I'd stopped being myself and started being this person everyone expected me to be." This disillusionment serves a crucial purpose in Jung's understanding of psychological development. Your psyche is essentially staging an intervention, forcing you to confront the gap between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. The ego, which Jung defined as your conscious sense of identity, begins to crack under the weight of this inauthenticity. And while this process feels like dying, because in many ways it is, it's actually the first stirring of your true self demanding to be born. The psychological consequence of this awakening is profound. You can no longer sleepwalk through your days. Every choice becomes a question. Is this me, or is this what I think I should do? This consciousness is both a gift and a burden, because once you see the mask, you can never fully forget it's there. The second sign appears in your dreams, those mysterious messages from the unconscious that Jung considered the royal road to understanding the psyche. Your dreams begin to feature recurring symbols of transformation. Butterflies emerging from cocoons, seeds breaking through concrete, ancient doors opening in familiar walls. These aren't random images generated by a sleeping brain. They're profound communications from the deepest layers of your psyche, announcing that change is not only coming, but necessary for your survival as an authentic being. Marcus, a 52-year-old accountant, began dreaming repeatedly of a house with rooms he'd never seen before. Night after night, he would discover new spaces in this familiar structure. Hidden libraries, secret gardens, chambers filled with light he couldn't identify. When he finally understood that the house represented his own consciousness and these hidden rooms were unexplored aspects of himself, his entire life began to shift. He started painting for the first time since childhood, rediscovered his love of poetry, and slowly began to integrate these forgotten rooms into his waking life. Jung understood that the unconscious communicates in symbols because the rational mind would reject these messages if they came as direct commands. The language of dreams bypasses our psychological defenses, planting seeds of transformation in the fertile soil of our imagination. When transformation dreams begin, they signal that your unconscious is preparing for a fundamental reorganization of your personality. The spiritual consequence of this dream phase is a growing sense that you are larger than you imagined. These hidden rooms, secret gardens, and unexplored territories all exist within you. You begin to sense the vast landscape of your own inner world, and with it comes both excitement and terror at the magnitude of who you might become. The third sign is perhaps the most unsettling, the emergence of your shadow. Jung defined the shadow as the repository of all the qualities, impulses, and aspects of yourself that you've deemed unacceptable and banished from conscious awareness. As you approach your true self, this shadow begins to surface, often in ways that shock and disturb you. You might find yourself experiencing emotions you've always prided yourself on not feeling. Jealousy if you've always been generous, anger if you've always been peaceful, desire if you've always been disciplined. These aren't signs that you're becoming a worse person. They're signs that you're becoming a complete person, integrating parts of yourself that have been hidden in the basement of your psyche. Elena, a devoted mother and community volunteer, was horrified when she began fantasizing about abandoning all her responsibilities and running away to live anonymously in another city. She'd built her entire identity around being selfless and dependable, but her shadow contained an equally powerful desire for freedom and adventure. Rather than acting on these impulses destructively, she learned to honor them creatively, taking solo trips, pursuing photography, and gradually integrating her need for independence into her life as a mother and partner. Jung emphasized that the goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, but to befriend it. Your shadow contains not just your negative qualities, but also your hidden strengths, your unexpressed creativity, your dormant passions. The person who has never acknowledged their capacity for selfishness may also have never accessed their healthy ability to prioritize their own needs. The one who has never admitted their anger may have never touched their fierce protective power. The psychological consequence of shadow integration is wholeness. You stop being at the mercy of unconscious impulses because you've brought them into the light of awareness. You become more compassionate toward others because you recognize in them the same complex mixture of light and darkness that exists within yourself. As we reach the midpoint of this journey into Jung's profound insights about meeting your true self, I want to pause and acknowledge that if you're recognizing these signs in your own life, you're not alone. Thousands of people around the world are going through this same process of awakening, this same sacred confrontation with authenticity. If this exploration is resonating with you, consider subscribing to continue this journey together. Your engagement helps more people discover these life-changing psychological truths that Jung spent a lifetime uncovering. The fourth sign reveals itself through what Jung called projection, the unconscious tendency to see in others what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. As you approach your authentic self, you begin to notice that the people who trigger your strongest reactions are actually mirrors, reflecting back aspects of yourself that you haven't yet integrated. The colleague whose confidence annoys you might be reflecting your own disowned power. The friend whose spontaneity you judge might be showing you your own suppressed desire for freedom. The partner whose emotional expressiveness you find overwhelming might be mirroring your own unacknowledged feelings. Jung observed that we are most triggered by what he called our unlived life, the paths we didn't take, the aspects of ourselves we didn't develop, the potential we didn't actualize. David spent years complaining about his brother's reckless decision to leave a secure job to become an artist. It wasn't until his own midlife crisis that he realized his judgment was actually envy in disguise. His brother was living the creative life that David had abandoned for financial security. The intensity of his reaction was proportional to how much he had betrayed his own artistic nature. This process of recognizing projections is both humbling and liberating. Humbling because you realize how much of your perception of others has been colored by your own unresolved issues. Liberating because as you withdraw these projections, you reclaim enormous amounts of psychic energy that had been tied up in unconscious conflicts. The spiritual consequence of projection withdrawal is a profound shift in how you relate to the world. Other people become less threatening because you're no longer unconsciously seeing your own rejected parts in them. Relationships become more authentic because you're responding to who people actually are, rather than to your projections of your own unlived possibilities. The fifth sign appears as what Jung termed the activation of the contrasexual archetype, the anima in men and the animus in women. This isn't about gender identity or sexual orientation. It's about the integration of qualities that your culture or family taught you belonged to the opposite gender. As you approach your true self, these qualities demand recognition and expression. A man might discover his nurturing capacity, his intuitive wisdom, his emotional depth, qualities he was taught to suppress as unmanly. A woman might uncover her assertiveness, her analytical power, her capacity for leadership, traits she learned to hide as unfeminine. This integration is crucial for psychological wholeness because it means you're no longer limited to half of the human experience. Jennifer, a soft-spoken teacher, was shocked when she found herself standing up to her demanding principal with a firmness and clarity she didn't know she possessed. For years, she had attracted relationships with domineering partners, unconsciously seeking in them the assertiveness she couldn't access in herself. As she integrated her inner masculine qualities, what Jung would call her animus, she no longer needed others to carry this energy for her. This integration often triggers resistance from those around you who are invested in your old patterns. Family members might feel threatened by your newfound wholeness because it highlights their own unconscious splits. Partners might struggle with your expanded identity because it challenges the role you've played in their psychological economy. The psychological consequence of contrasexual integration is a dramatic increase in your creative and problem-solving abilities. You're no longer limited to the narrow band of qualities your conditioning deemed appropriate for your gender. You have access to the full spectrum of human potential, which makes you infinitely more flexible and resourceful in navigating life's challenges. The sixth sign manifests as what Jung called the transcendent function, moments when opposing forces within your psyche suddenly synthesize into something entirely new. You might find solutions to long-standing problems emerging from nowhere, creative insights arriving fully formed, or sudden clarity about life directions that have puzzled you for years. This isn't ordinary problem-solving. It's the emergence of a third option that transcends the either-or thinking that has kept you trapped in psychological conflicts. The part of you that wants security and the part that craves adventure suddenly find a path that honors both. The aspect that values independence and the one that needs connection discover a way of relating that satisfies both needs. Thomas had been torn for decades between his desire to travel and his responsibility to care for his aging parents. The conflict seemed irreconcilable until a transcendent solution emerged. He began organizing educational tours for seniors, eventually bringing his parents on trips around the world. The solution honored his wanderlust while deepening his connection with his family. These moments of transcendence often feel mystical because they arrive with a sense of rightness that bypasses rational analysis. Jung understood that they emerge from what he called the collective unconscious, the deeper layer of psyche that contains universal patterns and wisdom. When you align with your authentic self, you gain access to this broader intelligence. The spiritual consequence of experiencing the transcendent function is a growing trust in your own inner wisdom. You begin to understand that you contain solutions to problems you haven't even encountered yet. This breeds a quiet confidence that whatever challenges life brings, some part of you already knows how to meet them. Now we arrive at the seventh and most profound sign, what Jung considered the ultimate encounter with the self, spelled with a capital S to distinguish it from the ordinary ego self. This is the moment when you realize that beneath all your identities, roles, and personalities lies something vast, timeless, and connected to the fundamental fabric of existence itself. People describe this realization differently. Some speak of a profound sense of coming home to themselves. Others describe it as recognizing their face before they were born. Many report a simultaneous experience of being utterly individual and completely universal, as if they've discovered their unique note in the cosmic symphony. This isn't a one-time event, but rather a deepening recognition that unfolds over time. You begin to identify less with your temporary roles and more with the consciousness that witnesses them all. The executive, the parent, the friend, the lover. These become costumes you wear rather than prisons that confine you. You develop what Jung called a relativization of the ego, where your sense of self becomes more flexible and expansive. Maria, after years of spiritual seeking, described her encounter with the self this way. I was sitting in meditation when suddenly I realized that the one who was meditating, the one who was seeking, and the one who was being sought were all the same consciousness. It was like discovering I'd been looking for my glasses while they were on my head the whole time. The seeker and the sought were never separate. This recognition brings what Jung called a profound sense of meaning. Not meaning derived from external achievements or relationships, but an inherent sense that your existence itself is meaningful, that your unique perspective and experience contribute something irreplaceable to the universal story. The psychological consequence of self-realization is what Jung termed individuation, becoming who you truly are rather than who you think you should be. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or disconnected from others. Paradoxically, the more you become authentically yourself, the more you recognize your fundamental interconnection with all life. But Jung warned us that this journey is not for the faint of heart. The encounter with your true self demands the death of everything false within you. Every mask must be removed, every pretense abandoned, every false identity dissolved. This is why he called it both terrifying and beautiful. Terrifying because it requires the ego to surrender its control. Beautiful because what emerges is your authentic nature in all its magnificent complexity. The terror comes from the realization that everything you thought you knew about yourself was just a story you told to make sense of the mystery of your existence. Your career, your relationships, your beliefs, your entire life structure. All of it becomes provisional, subject to revision as your true nature emerges. This can feel like psychological death, because in many ways it is. The person you thought you were doesn't survive intact. But the beauty lies in what Jung called the birth of the true individual. When the false structures fall away, what remains is more real, more alive, more connected to the source of creativity and meaning than anything you've experienced before. You discover that beneath all your constructed identities lies something unshakable. A presence, an awareness, a way of being in the world that feels absolutely right. This true self doesn't emerge fully formed. It requires careful tending, like a rare flower that blooms only under specific conditions. You must create space for it in your daily life, honor its unique needs and expressions, and protect it from the forces that would try to reshape it into something more conventional or acceptable. Jung observed that those who complete this journey become what he called modern individuals, people who live from their own authentic center rather than from collective expectations. They develop what he termed ethical responsibility, not following external moral codes, but responding to life from their deepest truth. This doesn't make them rebels or outcasts, but rather bridges between the collective world and the realm of individual meaning. The process of meeting your true self also activates what Jung called the healing function of the psyche. As you integrate your shadow, withdraw your projections, and align with your authentic nature, you spontaneously begin to heal not just your own wounds, but contribute to the healing of the collective psyche. Your individuation becomes a gift to the world because authentic individuals serve as permission for others to undertake their own journey toward wholeness. This is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Jung's vision, that personal transformation and collective healing are intimately connected. When you do the courageous work of becoming yourself, you create ripples that extend far beyond your individual life. Your children see a model of authentic living. Your friends witness the possibility of genuine self-expression. Strangers sense something real in your presence that awakens their own longing for authenticity. The journey toward meeting your true self is not a destination, but a way of traveling through life. Once you've glimpsed your authentic nature, you can't unknow what you've discovered. Every choice becomes an opportunity to align more deeply with who you really are. Every relationship becomes a chance to practice showing up as your true self. Every challenge becomes an invitation to discover new aspects of your authentic nature. Jung understood that this process would continue throughout your entire life. He called it opus contra naturam, work against nature, because it requires conscious effort to overcome the natural tendency toward unconsciousness and conformity. Yet he also recognized it as the most natural thing in the world, the fulfillment of your deepest purpose as a human being. The signs we've explored today are not just interesting psychological phenomena, they are invitations from the deepest part of yourself, calling you home to who you've always been beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation. The disillusionment that feels so painful is actually your psyche refusing to accept anything less than truth. The dreams that disturb your sleep are messages from the parts of yourself that are ready to be born. The shadow that emerges is not your enemy but your missing half, containing gifts you never knew you possessed. As you recognize these signs in your own life, remember that meeting your true self is both the most natural and the most revolutionary act you can perform. Natural, because it's simply becoming who you were always meant to be. Revolutionary, because in a world that profits from your confusion about your own nature, authenticity becomes an act of radical transformation. The path is not always easy, but Jung promised that it leads to what he called a life worth living, not a perfect life, but a real one. A life where your choices arise from your deepest truth rather than from fear or obligation. A life where your relationships are based on genuine connection rather than unconscious projection. A life where your work emerges from your authentic gifts rather than from what you think you should do. The terrifying beauty of meeting your true self lies in this paradox. You must be willing to lose everything you think you are in order to find everything you actually are. You must be willing to disappoint others in order to avoid disappointing your soul. You must be willing to stand alone in your truth in order to find your true place in the human community. Jung's final insight about this journey is perhaps his most profound. that the goal is not to become someone new, but to become who you have always been. Your true self is not a destination to reach, but a reality to uncover. It has been present all along, waiting patiently beneath the surface of your constructed identity, ready to emerge the moment you create space for its expression. Today, as you move through your daily life, pay attention to the subtle signals your psyche is sending. Notice what feels forced and what feels natural. Observe what energizes you and what drains your vitality. Listen to the voice that speaks quietly beneath the noise of obligation and expectation. That voice is your true self, and it has been calling to you your entire life. The journey of individuation that Jung mapped is not a luxury for the privileged few, but a necessity for anyone who wants to live fully. In a world that often seems bent on reducing us to our roles and functions, choosing to meet your true self becomes an act of profound courage and love. Love for yourself, love for those who will benefit from your authenticity, and love for the greater unfolding of human consciousness itself. The terrifying beauty awaits. Your true self is ready to be met. The only question that remains is whether you're ready to say yes to the adventure of becoming who you were always meant to be.